My name is Violet Mon, and I'm 21 years old. 9 years ago, my mom died of cancer. I was 12, old enough to understand that death was permanent, but too young to know how to live with the kind of silence it leaves behind. People say time softens grief. What they don't tell you is that it can also sharpen other things, like control, like resentment, like the quiet ways families break without anyone noticing. My father didn't disappear after the funeral, not technically. He still showed up to school meetings, still paid bills, still told people he was holding it together for Violet. But the version of him that laughed easily, that asked questions and waited for answers, vanished somewhere between the hospital room and the cemetery. Grief hollowed him out. Control moved in and made itself comfortable. After Mom died, the house we'd lived in together felt unbearable. Every room was full of her shoes by the door, her mug in the sink, her handwriting on the calendar in the kitchen. Dad started working longer hours in the city, coming home late and leaving early, like proximity to me was something he could ration. No one ever sat me down and asked what I wanted. Decisions just happened around me. So when my grandparents offered for me to stay with them, it was framed as temporary, practical. Just until things settle, Dad said, already halfway out the door. Their house sat just outside the city on about 3 acres of land that backed up into a stretch of woods. It wasn't impressive, but it was sturdy. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a big kitchen with worn countertops, and a window that looked out onto the trees. The floors creaked when you walked across them, and in the winter the heat took its time reaching the far rooms, but it felt warm, lived in, safe. I didn't know then that it would become the center of my entire life. Dad stayed in the city during the week and came by on weekends or holidays, and even as a kid, I noticed something unsettling about those visits. He didn't come to spend time with me. He came to assert himself. The moment he walked in, he'd start rearranging things, moving chairs, commenting on the way Grandpa maintained the property, questioning Grandma about groceries, bills, repairs, like they were interns who needed supervision. He told me what time to go to bed, what I should eat, how long I could stay outside, which friends were appropriate. Everything had to be done his way, on his timeline, with his approval. If anyone pushed back, he'd sigh heavily and say he was just trying to help, like disagreement was proof of our incompetence. My best friend Lucas lived about 10 minutes down the road. We'd known each other since we were little, before funerals, before hospitals, before everything felt complicated. We built forts in the woods behind my grandparents' place and swore we'd never be like the adults we saw messing everything up. If not for Lucas, those years would have swallowed me whole. Mom had been an only child. I was an only child. So when my grandparents' health started declining years later, the outcome should have been obvious. There were no siblings, no cousins circling, no complicated family tree. Still, no one talked about it, especially not Dad. He behaved as if the house, the land, the history attached to it all existed in some vague gray area he could claim by default. When Grandpa passed, everything changed. The lawyer called me a few days after the funeral. Dad was standing right next to me when I answered. The lawyer's voice was calm and practiced, explaining things slowly, carefully. The will, the house, the land. Grandpa's old pickup truck that somehow still ran despite being held together by stubbornness and duct tape. A savings account my grandparents had quietly built over the years. All of it was mine. I remember watching my father's face as the words sank in. Not embarrassment, not guilt, irritation, like I'd just complicated his life by existing. He didn't say anything, just turned and walked away, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. Lucas was there that day, helping me sort through Grandpa's tools in the garage. When Dad disappeared into the house, Lucas looked at me and said quietly, "So, you own the place now? Wow, that's going to make holidays weird." I laughed then. I didn't understand how right he was. Dad never mentioned the inheritance again. Not once. He kept acting like the man of the house, making rules, issuing commands, deciding what happened and when. Over the years, he used my mom's life insurance money to renovate parts of the place. New appliances, fresh paint, minor upgrades, and every time he acted like I should be grateful, like he was doing me a favor by investing in the house. No one ever said the word ownership out loud, and I didn't push it. Grief teaches you to stay quiet, to accept things as they are so they don't get worse. So does being a daughter who doesn't want to lose the only parent she has left. I told myself it was easier this way, that keeping the peace was worth it. that someday, when I was older, things would naturally even out. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't see at 12 or even at 20, was that my silence wasn't neutral. It was permission. And my father had never needed much encouragement to take control of something he thought belonged to him. When my father told me he was dating someone seriously, I wasn't surprised. It had been years since my mom died, long enough that people had stopped lowering their voices when they mentioned her, long enough that Dad had grown tired of being the widower everyone pitied. Still, the way he announced it felt less like sharing news, and more like declaring a decision that had already been made. "She's great," he said one night over dinner, scrolling through his phone. "Smart, organized, knows what she wants." Those last words should have warned me. Her name was Samantha Reeves. She was 30, worked as a preschool teacher, and came with 2 kids under 10, Logan and Chloe. Dad talked about her like she was a miracle solution to everything he felt he'd lost. A ready-made family, built-in validation, someone who asked his opinion and praised his leadership. The first time she came to the house, she didn't knock. She just walked in behind Dad like she belonged there. Samantha had this polished, put-together look, athleisure outfits that probably cost more than my textbooks, hair always perfectly done, a white SUV parked in the driveway like it was part of the scenery. She smiled a lot, but it never reached her eyes. Those were always scanning, measuring. She walked through the house slowly, touching things as she went, opening cabinets, peeking into drawers, running her fingers along the vintage wallpaper in the hallway. "Your grandmother had such interesting taste," she said, lingering on the word interesting, like it was a polite synonym for outdated. "It's very authentic, very lived in." The way she said lived in made my jaw tighten. Dad, of course, beamed like she'd just praised the Sistine Chapel. "She's got such a good eye," he said proudly. "So many ideas for improvements." Her kids were worse. Logan, maybe 8, spent the entire visit touching everything he wasn't supposed to touch while maintaining direct eye contact, like it was a challenge. Chloe, 6, knocked over one of Grandma's favorite plants and stared at me like it was my fault for putting it where she could reach it. When I mentioned the plant, Samantha laughed. "Oh, kids will be kids. They're just excited to have so much space. They're not used to houses like this." Houses like this. Lucas stopped by later that evening and caught the tail end of their visit. After they left, he surveyed the living room where Samantha had subtly repositioned Grandma's throw pillows. "Well," he said, deadpan, "nothing says I'm definitely not planning to redecorate your entire life like rearranging furniture on the first visit." I laughed. Dad didn't. He was smitten. Over the next few months, he changed. Bought new clothes, whitened his teeth, started talking about our future like it was a project plan. Samantha played her role perfectly, asking his opinion, deferring to his decisions, making him feel like the strong provider he so desperately wanted to be again. 3 months in, she was practically living with us. Her toiletries appeared in Dad's bathroom. Her car was in the driveway more than it was at her apartment. Logan and Chloe claimed the guest room like they were settling in for the long haul, and once they got comfortable, the kids' behavior shifted. Logan broke my things and acted confused when I got upset. Chloe went through my room when I wasn't home and denied everything with wide, innocent eyes. Whenever I complained, Samantha put on that wounded look and suggested maybe I wasn't used to having kids around. Dad always took her side. "They're just kids," he'd say. "You need to be more flexible." By month 4, Samantha stopped pretending. She rearranged the living room while Dad was at work and acted like it had always been that way. Replaced Grandma's dish towels with organic cotton ones. Threw out food she didn't approve of and replaced it with expensive alternatives I never asked for. And then she started treating me differently, like I was a guest. One afternoon, she sat me down at the kitchen table, smiling tightly. "You know, Violet, I've been thinking. This house is big, bigger than one person really needs." I said nothing. "You could rent an apartment nearby," she continued. "I even know the market rates. Around here, it's about $1,500 a month, but I'd only charge you $2,200. Really a steal." "Charge me for living in my own house." She went on, talking about nurseries and growing families and how my room would be perfect for a baby. I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something. Anything. He just nodded. And that's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. Samantha announced her pregnancy like it was a coronation. She waited until dinner, until my father had poured himself a drink and the kids were distracted with tablets at the table. Then she placed one hand on her stomach and smiled in that practiced, serene way she'd perfected. "We're expecting," she said. Dad froze for half a second, just long enough for me to see the shock. Then his face cracked into something close to awe. He stood up, walked around the table, and hugged her like this single fact had just rewritten his entire life. I felt something drop in my chest. Not jealousy, not even anger. Certainty. From that moment on, the house shifted. Not gradually, not subtly. It was like someone flipped a switch, and suddenly I was no longer part of the picture they were framing. Samantha started talking about the future constantly, about the baby, about space, about how things would need to change to support a real family. She said it casually, conversationally, like she wasn't slowly erasing me from every sentence. One afternoon, she cornered me in the kitchen while Dad was at work. "I've been doing some thinking," she said, flipping through listings on her phone. "This place just isn't laid out efficiently for a growing family." I leaned against the counter, already bracing myself. "The baby will need a nursery," she continued, "and the kids deserve proper rooms. Your room would be perfect for that. My room. The room I'd lived in since I was 12. The room with my mom's pictures still tucked into drawers. The room that still smelled faintly like the lavender detergent Grandma used. And of course," Samantha added lightly, "my mother has agreed to move in temporarily to help after the baby's born. She'll need the guest room." I turned to my father. He nodded. Just nodded. Like this was all settled. "So, where do I go?" I asked quietly. Samantha smiled. "That's the exciting part. Your own place. Independence. I can rent you something close by. Market rate around here is about $1,500, but I'd only charge you $200. Really generous, considering." Considering what? That she was kicking me out of my own home? I didn't argue. Not then. I told them I'd think about it. Samantha's smile tightened. "You should decide quickly. Waiting too long limits everyone involved." That night I texted Lucas with 2 words. "Emergency drinks?" He showed up 20 minutes later, took one look at my face, and handed me a bottle without asking questions. After I told him everything, he shook his head slowly. Classic. Nothing says family values like kicking out the homeowner to make room for Grandma. 2 weeks after the pregnancy announcement, I came home from class to find my bedroom door open. Samantha was inside. Not standing in the doorway this time, fully inside. Cardboard boxes spread across the floor, my closet half empty, my books stacked like donations, my mom's framed photos wrapped in newspaper like fragile clutter. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to surprise even me. She looked up with a bright smile. "Hi, sweetie. I'm just helping you get started. Your father and I decided it'd be better to move you sooner rather than later." Your father and I decided. No one had asked me what I decided. "You need to stop," I said. "Now. Get out of my room." Samantha's tone shifted into that calm, condescending preschool teacher voice. "There's no need to be unpleasant. I'm trying to help you transition to adult living. This is exciting. Your own place. Real independence." I repeated myself. That's when the mask dropped. She straightened up, her smile vanishing like it had never existed. "Listen, little girl," she said quietly, her voice razor sharp. "I'm pregnant with your father's child. This house needs to work for a real family, not an overgrown student who can't handle growing up." She picked up another box and kept packing like I wasn't there. "We've already paid the deposit on your apartment. Movers come Monday." Movers. They'd hired movers. For my things, without asking me. When I said they couldn't do this, she looked genuinely confused. "Of course we can. The lease is signed. You should be grateful we handled the logistics." Most parents wouldn't. That's when my father walked in. He took in the scene. Boxes, my face, Samantha standing there like a warden, and didn't ask a single question. "We decided to rip the Band-Aid off," he said. "You've been dragging your feet." "You decided?" I asked. "To evict me?" He sighed. "This is happening whether you like it or not. You can be mature about it, or you can throw a tantrum. Either way, you're moving out this weekend." Overgrown kid. That's what he called me. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Dad told me to put it away. Samantha snapped that families make decisions together. I asked one simple question. "Dad, whose name is on the deed?" The silence was deafening. When the truth finally landed, Samantha's face went through disbelief, panic, and something close to terror. And that's when I knew. They hadn't planned for this. The room went quiet in a way that felt unreal, like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of it. I was still holding my phone up, recording. My father stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Samantha sat down hard on the edge of my bed, one of my boxed-up books still clutched in her hands. "That can't be right," she said slowly. "You're just a student." "I'm a student who owns this house," I replied. "Inherited it from my grandparents. Legally, all of it." Dad finally spoke. "Well, yes, technically, it's in your name, but—" "There is no but," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You just told me you were kicking me out of my own property." Samantha's face drained of color. "But your father pays for everything, utilities, maintenance." "On my property," I said, "like a tenant." The word landed hard. She looked at Dad, then back at me. "He renovated the house." "With my mom's life insurance," I said, "to improve my house." For the first time since I'd met her, Samantha looked genuinely afraid. Dad's jaw tightened. "Fine, it's your house, but you're still my daughter, and you're still going to do what I tell you." "No," I said quietly, "I'm not." He scoffed and walked out, muttering that we'd see about that. Samantha stayed seated, staring at the boxes like they'd suddenly become evidence of a crime. "This is insane," she whispered. "This isn't how families work." "You're right," I said. "Families don't usually try to steal each other's homes." She looked up at me with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've just done." I texted Lucas immediately. "They tried to pack my stuff, without asking." His reply came seconds later. "Nuclear option time?" That weekend, I didn't touch my homework. I researched. Lucas came over Saturday morning with coffee and his laptop. He called it a war council. We sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal websites and state statutes. Here's what I learned. When you let people live in your house long enough, they establish residency. That means you can't just kick them out. You have to do it properly. But when there's no lease, no rent, no written agreement, they're tenants at will, which means they have very few rights. 30 days notice, that's it. And the fun part? Back rent. Dad had lived there rent-free for 9 years. Samantha and her kids for 6 months. At fair market value for a 4-bedroom house, the numbers were staggering. "Your dad owes you around 200 grand, Lucas said, whistling softly. "Samantha's about 15,000 and counting." Monday morning, I went to the courthouse. Tuesday, I met with a lawyer to confirm I wasn't missing anything. Wednesday, I had eviction notices printed on official letterhead. Thursday evening, I waited until both of them were home and called a family meeting. Dad sat down already annoyed. Samantha placed one hand on her stomach like a shield. "This is about your housing situation," I said, sliding the folder onto the coffee table. Dad laughed. "You're kidding." I wasn't. I handed them the notices. "You're both being evicted. 30 days, effective immediately." The silence that followed was almost beautiful. "You can't do this," Dad shouted. "I'm your father." "Watch me." Samantha jumped up. "That's illegal. I'm pregnant." "Actually," I said calmly, "it's very legal." She scoffed. "We don't pay rent." Exactly. Dad read his notice like it was written in code. $200,000? That's what it costs to live here for 9 years. Samantha found her number and went pale. "I'll waive the lawsuit," I said, "if you leave in 30 days and sign an agreement not to pursue claims against the property." Dad slumped back onto the couch. Samantha cried, loud, furious sobs about babies and homelessness and unfairness. "Not my problem," I said. "You should have thought about that before you tried to steal my house." The next month was chaos. Dad tried guilt, then anger, then bargaining. Samantha went scorched earth. She called my university, tried to involve CPS, claimed pregnancy discrimination. The hearing was quick. The judge listened patiently, then told her, "You can't claim discrimination when you tried to illegally evict the property owner." Case dismissed. But the real bomb dropped in week 5. Dad called me, voice shaking. "We need to talk about the baby." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. When I got home, he was sitting at the table with papers spread out in front of him. "It's not mine," he said. "The paternity test proved it. Wrong blood type. Her ex-husband's." "She set me up," he whispered. I felt nothing. He looked at me like a broken man. I chose wrong. "Yes," I said, "you did." Samantha was gone that night, packed and vanished. Dad moved out 2 days later. He left behind everything he'd invested. Lucas came over with pizza the next day. "Will you forgive him?" "Maybe," I said, "but not today." For the first time in years, the house was quiet, and it was finally mine. The house didn't feel empty after they left. It felt still. For the first time in years, there were no slammed doors, no passive-aggressive rearranging of furniture, no tension humming beneath every conversation. The silence wasn't lonely. It was spacious, like I could finally breathe without someone correcting the way I inhaled. Samantha disappeared first. No dramatic goodbye. No final speech about family or forgiveness. She packed her things while Dad was at work, loaded the white SUV, and took Logan and Chloe with her. By the time I got home that evening, her side of the closet was bare. Her organic cotton towels were gone. So were the framed ultrasound photos she'd placed around the house like territorial markers. The only trace she left behind was damage. Scratches on the walls where she'd measured for nursery furniture. Boxes stacked in the garage labeled, "Donate," all filled with things that weren't hers to give away. Dad moved out 2 days later. He didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't raise his voice. The fight had gone out of him completely. He packed only his personal belongings, clothes, paperwork, a few tools, and left everything else behind. The couch he bought, the appliances he bragged about, the improvements he'd acted like made him indispensable. He paused in the doorway before he left. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said. I didn't respond, because intent doesn't undo damage. He rented a one-bedroom apartment across town. I heard about it from Lucas, who had a talent for finding out things I didn't ask about. Apparently, Dad tried once more to talk to a lawyer about the back rent. Apparently, the lawyer laughed. Politely, professionally, but still laughed. He never challenged it again. A week passed, then 2. The house settled into a new rhythm. I finished the semester. I slept better than I had in years. I walked through the rooms without bracing myself for conflict. I cleaned, not because someone told me to, but because I wanted to reclaim the space. I put Grandma's throw pillows back where they belonged. One evening, as I was sorting through the last of the boxes Samantha had packed, I found my mom's framed photos wrapped in newspaper. My hands shook as I unwrapped them, like I was afraid they'd break even though they were intact. That's when it hit me. Not the anger, the grief. I sat on the floor and cried, not because of what I'd lost recently, but because of what I'd been carrying since I was 12. Because somewhere along the way, I'd learned that keeping the peace meant shrinking myself, that love came with conditions, that I had to earn my place in my own life. Lucas came over that night with pizza and cheap beer, like he always did when he sensed something was wrong. "So," he said, handing me a slice, "you good?" I thought about it. "I'm okay," I said finally, which feels weird to say. He nodded. That's usually how okay starts. We sat on the back steps, watching the woods darken as the sun went down. The same woods where we'd built forts as kids. The same land my grandparents had loved fiercely enough to protect, even after they were gone. A few days later, Dad called again. I almost didn't answer. But I did. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said immediately. "I just needed to say I know I messed up. I let someone come between us. I let my fear and pride drive every decision." I waited. "I was wrong," he continued, "about everything." There it was. Not an excuse, not a justification, just an admission. "I'm not ready to fix things," I said. "And I'm not pretending this didn't happen." "I know," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know I finally understand." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a switch you flipped. It wasn't a reward for regret. It was something that required distance, consistency, and time. And I wasn't there yet. The eviction paperwork finalized at the end of the month. The back rent claim stayed on record, not because I wanted to ruin my father's life, but because accountability mattered. Consequences mattered. Pretending things were fine had cost me enough already. Life moved forward. I finished school, took a part-time job, fixed up the house slowly, carefully, on my terms. I planted new flowers where Samantha had planned her nursery. I repainted my bedroom, but kept the same layout. Same window, same view of the trees. One afternoon, Lucas looked around the living room and said, "You ever think about getting a dog?" I smiled. "Yeah," I said, "I think I will." The house didn't need to be full of people to feel like a home. It just needed respect. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for it. I was enforcing it.